Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Reid. Behind me, I have the folks that have been behind me for a long, long time. First, my beautiful wife, Evelyn, who's been with me for 40 years. We've been married for 31. We've known each other for 40. We have been blessed to have 2 children who continue to grow our family. We've got my favorite daughter, Keisha. We also have our son, Keith, our daughter-in-law, Becca, and the most wonderful human in the world, our grandson, Henry, who's 5 months old this week. But also behind me...
Henry looks pretty healthy to me.
And if he could just play here with my uniform, he'd be fine, but otherwise he'll probably sleep. We also have behind us a very close friend and colleague, Dr. William R. Sutherland. I call him my buddy Bert. My buddy Bert has penned on every rank since colonel. And he's been a colleague, a friend, and a mentor, and I thank all of them for being here today and as they've been along the way.
Thank you. We're so pleased to see the families here today. General Selva and General McDew, you come before this committee today amid a sweeping transition in military leadership that will take place over the coming months. In addition to your nominations, this committee is currently considering the nominations of a new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, new service chiefs for the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps, and potentially others in the near future. This team of military leaders will soon be responsible for preparing our military to confront the most diverse and complex array of global crises since the end of World War II. The list of challenges for our national security is as daunting as it is drearily familiar. The rampage of ISIS terrorist army, Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons and support for its destabilizing proxies, revisionist Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and China's continued military buildup and aggressive behavior towards its neighbors. And yet, while worldwide challenges like these grow, the Defense Department has grown larger but less capable, more complex but less innovative, and more proficient at defeating low-tech adversaries but more vulnerable to high-tech ones. And worse, the self-inflicted wounds of the Budget Control Act and sequestration-level defense spending have made all these problems worse. Over the past 4 years, we've seen drastic reductions to defense spending that have cut Army and Marine Corps in strength dangerously low and slowed critical modernization priorities across the services, placing at risk our nation's military technological superiority. At the same time, our military has maintained an accelerated operational tempo and, as a consequence, entered a dangerous downward spiral of military capacity and readiness that risks compromising each service's ability to execute our defense strategic guidance at a time of accumulating danger to our national security. The current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has stated that even if the Defense Department receives the additional $38 billion above the budget caps that the President's defense budget requests, our military would still, quote, remain at the lower ragged edge of manageable risk in our ability to execute the defense strategy, unquote. More worrisome, every one of our military service chiefs has testified that continued sequestration-level defense spending puts American lives at greater risk. Unless we change course and return to strategy-driven defense budgets, I fear our military will confront depleted readiness, chronic modernization problems, and deteriorating morale. No matter how many dollars we spend, we won't be able to provide our military the equipment they need with a broken defense acquisition system that takes too long and costs too much. For example, an Army study looked at the time it would take to go through all of the AT&L reviews and buy nothing. What was the answer? 10 years. 10 years to buy nothing. Our adversaries are not shuffling paper, they're building weapon systems, and it's time for us to do the same. General Selva, if confirmed as the next vice chairman, in addition to your many responsibilities supporting the next chairman, you would serve as the chairman of the Joint Requirements Oversight Council and an executive member of the Defense Acquisition Board. In this combination of roles, you will have a critical role in the defense acquisition system, from identifying and approving joint requirements to assessing cost, schedule, and performance. Members of this committee will be very interested to hear your thoughts on acquisition reform, In particular, we will be interested to hear your views on how we fix blurred lines of accountability inside the defense acquisition system that allow its leaders to evade responsibility for results. This is the central problem this committee is trying to address in the acquisition reforms adopted in the Senate's Defense Authorization Bill. There are diverse views on acquisition reform, but one thing is for sure, the status quo is unacceptable, and we need a Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs who recognizes that. General McDew, as the Commander of Air Mobility Command, you are well aware of the challenges facing TRANSCOM in projecting and sustaining forces around the world amid ongoing budget cuts. But TRANSCOM isn't just providing capability to support other commands in confronting escalating global threats. Some of these threats are aimed at TRANSCOM itself. For example, just last year, this committee conducted an exhaustive investigation of the cyber threats facing TRANSCOM. The report documented at least 20 advanced cyber intrusions targeting TRANSCOM contractors, all attributed to China. That's because, according to the Pentagon, Chinese military analysts have identified logistics and mobilization as potential U.S. vulnerabilities, and their military doctrine advocates targeting these networks to impact our ability to operate during the early stages of conflict. Given TRANSCOM's dependence upon the private sector and the fact that the vast majority of their business is conducted on unclassified networks, there's still important work left to be done to enhance the Defense Department's ability to share information with its critical transportation contractors and assist them in detecting and mitigating cyber attacks. General Selva, General McDew, we thank you both for appearing before us today. We look forward to your testimony. Senator Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me join you in welcoming General Selva and General McDew. Thank you for your service and for your sacrifice, and also for your family's service and sacrifice. And let me, too, welcome Ricky, and thank you, ma'am, for your service as well as your support. And General McDew, your wife, Evelyn, hello, and Keisha and Keith and Becca, and the most important person here who just left, Henry. I also want to commend Keith for his service in the Coast Guard. Thank you for your service. And finally, Dr. Sutherland, thank you for being here also. The United States, as the chairman indicated very astutely, faces challenges across the globe that are unprecedented in nature. And if confirmed, you'll both be playing an important role in addressing these complex international issues. Last week, we had General Dunford before the committee, the designee to be chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he testified that the threats confronting the United States are multifaceted and varied. They include the campaign against ISIL, building local forces to counter ISIL, deterring additional Russian aggression toward Ukraine and its European neighbors, our rebalance the Asia-Pacific theater, and how best to address the sequestration and the ongoing fiscal challenges of the department. And General Selva, if confirmed as Vice Chairman, you'll be working closely with General Dunford to address each of these issues. And we're looking forward to your views on all the issues that I've mentioned and the Chairman's mentioned. In addition, if confirmed, you will assume a number of distinct responsibilities as the Vice Chairman. In the past, the Vice Chair has been an integral participant in the interagency process, working closely with senior policymakers within the Department and at the National Security Council on critical national security issues. Additionally, the Vice Chairman oversees the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, JROC, which is charged with reviewing requirements for acquisition programs to ensure they are reasonable and necessary. And finally, as a senior member of the Nuclear Weapons Council, the Vice Chairman plays a central role in ensuring the United States safely maintains its nuclear weapons stockpile. And I look forward to hearing more from you, General Selva, about how we will prioritize and execute all these responsibilities to the Vice Chairman. General McDew, you've been nominated to be commander of U.S. Transportation Command, TRANSCOM. It encompasses the Air Force's Mobility Command, the Navy's Military Sealift Command, and the Army's Surface Deployment and Distribution Command, and is really the backbone of our strategic mobility. And for the past several years, TRANSCOM has played a critical role in supplying our operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as bringing home our troops and equipment after deployments. Given the myriad of national security challenges facing the United States and the long-term effects of sequestration on our defense budget, we will certainly look to your views on the challenges TRANSCOM must tackle in this environment. And as the chairman indicated, one of those challenges is cyber intrusions. It will become more of a problem as the days go on rather than less of a problem. And your views are absolutely critical, and your actions will be critical going forward. So, Mr. Chairman, again, let me join you in welcoming our nominees and thanking them for their service.
Thank you. I'd like to mention the witnesses. We have standard questions that are asked of all military nominees, and I would now like to read them to you. In order to exercise its legislative and oversight responsibilities, it is important that this committee and other appropriate committees of the Congress are able to receive testimony, briefings, and other communications of information. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
I have.
General?
I have.
Do you agree when asked to give your personal views, even if those views differ from the administration in power?
I do.
I do.
Have you assumed any duties or undertaken any actions which would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
I have not.
I have not.
Will you ensure your staff complies with deadlines established for requested communications, including questions for the record and hearings?
I will.
I will.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
I will.
I will.
Will those witnesses be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
They will.
They will.
Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify upon request before this committee?
I do.
I do.
Do you agree to provide documents, including copies of electronic forms of communications, in a timely manner when requested by a duly constituted committee, or to consult with the committee regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such documents?
I do.
I do.
Thank you very much. General Selva and then General McDew, please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members of the Senate Armed Services Committee, it's a great honor to appear before you today as President Obama's nominee to become the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. First, I want to thank all of you for your undying support for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen who guard our liberty every single day, specifically those who serve today in the United States Transportation Command. Leading the men and women of Transportation Command has been a distinct honor, and I have no doubt that they are representative of the service members across our institution who are the best trained, best led, best equipped, and most capable military in the world. I would like to acknowledge and congratulate my close friend and colleague, General Darren McDew, testifying beside me today. I can think of no person more qualified to lead the men and women of the United States Transportation Command, and I wish him and Evelyn the greatest of success, subject to your confirmation. If confirmed, I look forward to working with the senior leadership in the Department of Defense, the combatant commanders, our friends, allies, and partners around the world, key members of the executive branch in the interagency process, and members of Congress, including this committee, to address a wide spectrum of challenges confronting our nation. We are increasingly at risk in space, across the networks of cyberspace, and face a cast of regional and near-peer competitors who are fielding increasingly sophisticated, conventional, and nuclear arsenals. While these threats represent a clear and present danger to our security, we continue to confront violent extremists, such as ISIL, who shock the very core of our beliefs and threaten to further destabilize a very strategic region that includes several of our key allies. Effectively confronting these threats, as diverse as they are, requires a whole-of-government approach. Our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen truly are the heart and soul of our competitive advantage, and they are far more effective when the full weight of our country's power is working in unison. If confirmed, I look forward to being an advocate for those men and women who wear the uniform of our nation and their civilian counterparts in our department. Lastly, I want to say that I am humbled by the President's nomination and the Secretary's confidence in putting me before this committee as the nominee to be the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I'm grateful for the opportunity to appear before you today and look forward to working with you, subject to your confirmation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. General McDew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Reed, and distinguished members of the committee. It is indeed a great honor for me and my family to sit before you today. For 31 years, Evelyn and I have treated every single person that we've had the privilege to lead in our commands as an extension of our family. If confirmed, we look forward to welcoming the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen of Transportation Command to our extended family. Before I go any further, I also owe a debt of gratitude to my esteemed colleague, General Paul Selva, for his support of Air Mobility Command and his dedicated leadership of Transportation Command. I have no doubt that if confirmed, General Selva's service as Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs will benefit our nation. Members of the committee, thank you for your steadfast support of 118,000 men and women of Air Mobility Command. They are our nation's finest. I hope I have the opportunity to tell you more about them during questioning. If confirmed, I am excited to continue working with the men and women of U.S. Transportation Command, active duty, Guard, Reserve, and civilian, as well as the vast network of commercial carriers that support American forces worldwide. These unheralded professionals are the business end that project military power around the globe. I cannot overstate the importance of the often thankless work accomplished at Transcom, and I am humbled to be considered to be their commander. Members of the committee, I am committed to working with you and other committees to ensure our service members and civilians have everything needed to support and defend the United States of America. If confirmed, I will provide the leadership the men and women of Transportation Command expect and deserve. I appreciate the trust and confidence the President, the Secretary of Defense, and General Dempsey have placed in me by considering me for this position. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the members of the committee for conducting this hearing, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much, General. Thank you, General Selva. We had a hearing with the prospective Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff a few days ago, as you know, and one of the committee members, I believe it was Senator Manchin, asked the prospective Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dunford, what he believed was the greatest threat that the United States faces in the world today. And to the surprise of some, General Dunford responded, Russia. What is your opinion on that response to that question, General?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would put the threats to this nation in the following order: Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, and all of the organizations that have grown around the ideology that was articulated by al-Qaeda early in the turn of this century. And that's not to say that each or any of those present a clear and present danger today, but in that order you see the countries that are peer and near-peer competitors who are developing conventional and nuclear weapons that match our own. You see opaque governments that have ideologies that we don't agree with, and you see the broad base of terrorist threats that might threaten our interests abroad, our citizens abroad, and our homeland.
I got all that, but you agree with General Dunford that the first would be Russia?
Yes, sir.
Because?
Because Russia possesses the conventional and nuclear capability to be an existential threat to this nation should they choose to do so.
And you place ISIS last of those four priorities?
Yes, sir, I do.
Because?
Because right now ISIS does not present a clear and present threat to our homeland and to the existence of our nation. It is a threat we must deal with and we must help our regional partners deal with, but it does not threaten us at home.
Does it threaten us at home when these young men who have gone to Iraq and Syria and become radicalized and then return to the United States, that the head director of the FBI and the director of the Homeland Security have said is a direct threat to the United States? That's their testimony?
Yes, sir, I would agree with their assessment. However, I would qualify it with the following. Those do not present an existential threat to the existence of the nation. ISIL does not possess the tools or the capabilities to threaten the existence of the United States as we know it.
I would like your and General McDew's comments and assessment of the effects of sequestration on our ability to defend the nation and its effect on the risk to the men and women who are serving and the effect on their morale as they face this uncertainty that is dictated by sequestration, beginning with you, General Selva.
Mr. Chairman, I think sequestration presents a direct threat to the morale of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, who deserve the best maintained and best equipment available to fight the threats that face this nation. And as we see the effects of sequestration and the potential declines in the defense budget affecting readiness, they affect our ability to train those young men and women to do their work. They affect our ability to maintain and reset the equipment that they have been using for the better part of the last decade and a half in Iraq and Afghanistan. And they affect our ability to retain the best of those soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines as they make the decision on whether or not they believe they have the full support of the nation in the work that they do to defend our freedom and liberty every day. So I do believe sequestration has readiness impacts, it has impacts on our ability to maintain the force, and it has impacts on our ability to sustain the morale of the men and women who have committed to defending our freedom and liberty around the world.
And the OCO funding is a Band-Aid.
So I believe the OCO funding is a one-year incremental fix to a long-term problem that we all need to address together. And if confirmed, I look forward to working with this administration, with this Congress, and with this committee and others to try and find a long-term solution to that problem.
General McDew, first the answer on the greatest threat, and then the second, if you would.
One of the greatest threats that faces our nation is our ability to deal with the cyber threat. I will separate it slightly from the other discussion that you were having with General Selva and focus on one that impacts Transportation Command and our network more readily today, and that is our ability to figure out how we will continue to work with commercial industry that we're required to work with and need to work with. 90% of our work is done on the commercial networks, and that is a threat that I have got to face going forward if confirmed.
It's an interesting perspective. And so right now there is the possibility that adversarial nations could shut down your business.
There is always that threat that adversarial nations could shut down our nation. But I think this is something that the entire nation and a lot of folks in the whole of government.
But particularly your ability to get things to the warfighters.
Senator, that threat is there. I believe that U.S. Transportation Command has put some things in place to make that less likely. But as we go forward, the threat only gets worse. Our ability to deal with it must evolve, and we have to find ways to do better with it going forward.
Thank you very much. Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both, gentlemen, for your testimony. And General Selva, getting to one of your specific roles as Vice Chairman, that's the Council for the Command and Control, National Leadership Command and Control Council of Nuclear Weapons. Can you comment about that? It appears that this issue, particularly over the last several years with land-based forces, has become even more prominent with respect to not just aging infrastructure, but leadership issues, a whole host of issues. Can you just comment upon how you perceive your role and what you will do?
Senator, I believe the statutory roles that are defined for the Vice Chairman with respect to management of the nuclear weapons stockpile, the Nuclear Leadership Command and Control Network, as well as the National Deterrence Oversight Panel are fairly clear. They require me to be able to assert with confidence that we have a safe, secure, and reliable arsenal that is connected to our leadership by a reliable, secure, and resilient command and control network, and that puts the President of the United States as the authority for use of those weapons in direct control of the decisions that would accrue to our nuclear weapons inventory. And so I look forward to working with this committee, if confirmed, to make sure that all the legs of our nuclear triad and all of the capabilities that make our nuclear deterrent believable and ready are in place to give us that capability.
And looking forward, there's going to have to be a significant recapitalization of the nuclear enterprise, both land, air, and sea bases. And do you think we're fully prepared for that in terms of, particularly in terms of the issues of Chairman raised about sequestration and these budgets?
Senator Reid, I've only been recently studying the issues that accrue to the nuclear weapons enterprise as it relates to the nomination for this new position. And to be honest, I haven't had the time to look at all of the detail that would be required to answer that question. I would look forward to answering it in a classified environment with a lot more detail.
But I would assume your initial impression is that we have a big bill to pay going forward to maintain our current strategic dominance.
Yes, sir. My understanding is that the current weapon stockpile and the current delivery platforms require significant maintenance and upgrades. But I'm also aware of the requirement to invest in the long-range strike bomber, the Ohio-class replacement, and potentially a follow-on intercontinental ballistic missile to keep all three legs of our nuclear triad viable.
Let me switch gears, General McDew. You've really, I think, in your questions with the chairman and your opening statement, put your finger on the cyber issue. It seems to me that that's the first stage of any conflict today, which would be a cyber attack. And in fact, it's unclear when you cross the line into something that's a probing action or an act of war. Not only do you have to maintain the infrastructure of the Department of Defense, but you have numerous contractors. Can you comment on the challenge that you have with some of your contractors to maintain their cybersecurity and the steps you're taking to ensure that if they were compromised, it wouldn't cascade into your system?
Senator, I am beginning to understand the vastness of the network. I am more familiar with the Air Mobility Command portion and its contractors. However, in some of the study that I've done so far, which has not been in great depth, I see that Transportation Command has put some things in place in their contracting system to allow the contractors to show assuredness of their network and to provide for requirements to report intrusions in their network. Those are, I think, very beneficial. I think, if confirmed, I will want to look deeper into that and to see where we can strengthen those places where we can.
Thank you. And General Silva, final question, and just you will also, as the JROC chair, have a great deal to do about acquisition policy. Can you, general comments about the efforts underway to engage the services more actively in acquisition?
Senator, I'm aware that there's an active effort inside the Joint Requirements Oversight Council to reinvigorate the relationship with the stakeholders who bring requirements to the table and to look at the authorities and responsibilities for actually delivering the military capabilities as an outcome. If confirmed, I look forward to working with that body and with this committee as we continue the process of looking at the duplication of effort that might exist across the enterprise and to come back to you with any potential legislative proposals that might be required to remove requirements that are currently articulated in statute. That is the extent to which I've studied that process.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me mention something that's not very often talked about. I have briefly mentioned it to each one of you. The fact that the airlines are anticipating hiring about 20,000 pilots over the next 7 years due to the mandated retirement age of 65. In fact, I authored the amendment that raised it from 60 to 65. Maybe we should have put it at 70. We wouldn't put off that problem, but it is a serious thing. RAND did a release, a study that the airlines have an average of 2,000 per year over the next 10 years, and that they will be upwards of 5,000 after that. That compares over the last 10 years to 1,500. So this is something that's out there. And it's something that first of all, I'd like to ask each one of you, consider this a problem. Do you have any ideas right now that might help alleviate it?
Senator, the problem of pilot inventory in this nation, I believe, is going to become a readiness issue over time. It is not upon us, but it is approaching quickly. Three dynamics play out that cause that to happen. First is the exponential expansion of the airline industry internationally, which places a huge demand on the pilot inventory in the United States, as the preference to have an English-speaking pilot in cockpits is internationally known. The second, as you mentioned, is the approaching age of retirement for many of our pilots. The third is the decline in production of military pilots that are a preference across the network. And so each of those three will conspire over time to place heavier demands by the industry on the military inventory of pilots that are their preference. And so working with the airlines on innovative ways to bring civilian educated pilots out of our higher learning institutions directly into commercial air service is one of the initiatives that we've begun working with the airline industry.
Well, yeah, and I understand. This is not, right now we're putting out the fires that are burning today, but this is something that we know is coming. And I've talked to General Welsh about this several times, and he agrees that the logical place for them to go is going to be go to the military. You know, we spend the money training them. I guess the cost of getting a pilot to an F-22 capability is about $9 million. And so this is a huge issue. I'd suggest it's here. Now, any further thoughts on that, General McDew?
Senator, the one thing I would add is that although the numbers don't say that it's here with us today, the discussion is in our cockpits today. There is not a pilot that serves anywhere in any capacity across our nation that doesn't understand the demand.
Yeah, and you know, we tried something a year ago when we stood down 17 combat-coded squadrons. That was supposed to be till the end of the year, which would have been 6 months, and then 3 months later, they changed their mind and then stood them up again. That's my understanding, that actually cost more than what was saved during that 3-month period. And I'm not asking you if you were aware of that, but nonetheless, it's something I believe. Let me throw out 3 ideas here and just have you, maybe for the record, comment on each one of them. First of all, the idea of the cost of the training, $9 million to get a pilot up to those standards, and the fact that with their aviation bonuses over the next 9 years amount to $225,000. So those are 2 things that we have to face as a reality. The second thing that, to me, from my personal conversations with pilots, is the fact that they're not flying the sorties that they were flying before. They want to fly, and it used to average about 6 sorties a week, and now it's down to about 3 from what we've found out. And then the additional duties, since we've downsized, a lot of the pilots are doing things that were heretofore not done by pilots. So on those 3 issues, any comments you want to make now are fine. But why don't you, for the record, if the 2 of you would respond to those as problems that are there. Then the last thing I want to mention is, General McDew, in your written testimony, you talked about infrastructure shortfalls, and you didn't say anything about that in your abbreviated testimony. Is there anything you want to mention about the infrastructure problems that we're having right now?
Senator, I would have to get a little bit more depth, but one of the concerns I have is the ability to recapitalize the infrastructure, both on the sea, air, and land. There are considerable things that will need to be addressed over the next 5 to 10 years that will be problematic if we hit sequestration as we know it.
Yeah, appreciate that very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Selva and your family, thank you very much. General McDew and your family, thank you very much. Both of you are very lucky guys to have such wonderful families. General Selva, last week a new study showed that suicide attempts are most common in the newest enlisted soldiers who have never been deployed. In June, the Los Angeles Times brought attention to an unbelievable statistic. For women ages 18 to 29, women veterans have committed suicide at a rate nearly 12 times the rate of women non-veterans of the same age. And so these are folks who were active duty not too long before that time. And I want to know, if you're confirmed, will you prioritize mental health as a critical readiness issue?
I will, Senator, and I look forward to working with this committee to make sure that we have the mental health providers that are available to our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, particularly those in crisis. So subject to your confirmation, I commit to doing so.
And how will you work to reach female service members who face unique stressors, as well as also young enlisted troops who confront and worry about things like stigma regarding mental health care?
Senator, I believe that there should be no stigma attached to a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine who has the courage to seek mental health care when they're in crisis. And I will do everything in my power in this job and any other job to make sure that we try to remove that stigma from our military.
Okay, and I would also encourage you to keep in mind some of the unique challenges that our female service members face every single day. In regards to what Senator McCain said before about General Dunford's testimony regarding Russia as perhaps the most dangerous threat to our country, there's recent reports that just came out about a directed energy weapon they've developed. This is incredibly troubling. It can disable sophisticated guidance systems, navigation systems, communication systems, and I was wondering if there has been any discussion as to how to counter this threat at this time.
Sir, in the position I hold at United States Transportation Command, I'm not aware of any conversations, but I will endeavor, if confirmed, to get briefed up on any that might be.
If you could, that would be very, very helpful, because it, from the description, seems to be an incredibly troubling and dangerous weapon that is being worked on right now. Secondly is, and you were with Transportation Command, but secondly is in regards to North Korea. I was recently there, and not in North Korea, but in South Korea, met with the leadership there, met with some of the leaders in China to talk about this threat, and I'd like to get your perspective of how you assess that threat from North Korea and what plans you're aware of right now to deal with it.
Senator, North Korea represents one of those opaque governments that we have very little visibility into. So assessing the intentions of the North Korean government is something that requires a very careful intelligence analysis of what we can learn about the country. If confirmed, I look forward to working with the Office of Defense Intelligence as well as the interagency and the intelligence community to try to unpack the threat that is North Korea, not only from a perspective of their capabilities, but of their intentions.
General McDew, I was in Iraq a few weeks ago with a group led by Senator Kane, who's sitting next to me. And one of the things we talked about was with some Sunni tribal leaders. And one of them was from Haditha. And he said that his city was surrounded at the present time by ISIS, that many of the people who lived there were eating grass because there was no food coming in, that babies were not able to get milk, and that the population was in an extraordinarily dire situation. We had discussed with the military there about having an airlift come in to Haditha. It was mentioned in testimony here about a week or so ago by one of the witnesses that, well, the Iraqi Air Force has the ability to put a C-130 in there, but they have not. And you will be in TRANSCOM. And so I would ask you to take a look at this particular problem. I would love to discuss it further with you in the next few days. But we have people who are starving, in effect. And we have the ability to try to do something about it. Last, I would like to mention to you, General McDew, about the breach that we saw at OPM. It began in May 2014 with hackers using a contractor's compromised username and password. And you had mentioned about working with our commercial partners and civilian partners. I think it's critical in your position coming up to make sure to work with them, to harden their networks, to harden their abilities. And I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about appropriate measures you think we need to take moving forward.
Senator, if confirmed, I will do all the things that you suggest, because it is a threat that we must deal with, and I believe U.S. Transportation Command has done some things to date that are foundational. We will just try to extend those and strengthen them.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Selva, as you know, the department is currently building a cyber mission force of about 6,000. And overall, how do you measure things like readiness or force structure adequacy when we're largely unable to do those conventional net assessments of our adversaries' capabilities?
Senator, I think the first measure of our readiness in the cyber domain is our ability to defend the networks that allow us to provide command and control of our military. And as a result of that work, the cyber mission teams and the cyber protection teams have been put in place to protect those networks that our combatant commanders depend on to execute command and control of their fielded forces. I think three things have to accrue to cyber on a broader sense. The first is our ability to attribute whether or not the cyber intrusion is criminal activity, amateur hackers, or sponsored nation-state activity, because that then will condition the response of the nation. Will we respond to the nation-state? Will we respond to the criminal threat? Or will we respond to the amateur hacker? And I think that will ultimately be the measure of the wisdom of how we have put together the cyber protection teams and the cyber mission force. Putting a number of 6,000 against it may or may not be the right measure. If confirmed, I look forward to working with Admiral Mike Rogers in his roles in the National Security Agency as well as U.S. Cyber Command to try to get to that definition and continue to advocate the capability that will allow us to defend our cyber networks.
And as you look at those different threats and the sources of those different threats, how are you willing to step forward, I guess, to look at developing a policy and what our response should be to each of those threats? And again, when you look at the size of the force with 6,000, do you differentiate within that cyber mission force the direction that each of those members will take once the threat is identified, the source of that threat is identified?
Senator,
But my real question is, what are we going to do with policy?
Senator, that was exactly where I was headed, which is in the absence of statutes that define the responsibilities and authorities of our law enforcement agencies and our military capability to react in cyber, we run into those policy questions as a consequence of the nature of the threat. And so I think one of the more powerful things we can do is to put the power of statute behind those authorities and responsibilities so that we can define the lanes in the road and allow law enforcement to work those issues that are uniquely law enforcement and allow the military to respond to those military threats that emerge in cyber. And I look forward to working with the committee on those kinds of policies as we move forward on this issue.
I look forward to working with you on those issues as well, because I think cybersecurity in all realms is a priority of this country and should be, and we need to take action on it. When General Rodriguez stated that Libya-based threats to the U.S. interests are growing and that Libya is emerging as a safe haven where terrorists are able to train, where they're able to rebuild with impunity, I think all of us on the panel realized that was the case. But my question to you is, do you think that we are doing enough to prevent those terrorist groups from establishing these safe havens in Libya? And down the road, what are the lessons that we've learned from our experiences in Syria with regards to what is now happening in Libya?
Senator, I'm aware of the work we're doing with our allies, partners, and friends across all of North Africa to look at the growing threat from al-Qaeda and al-Qaeda-related terrorist organizations. I have not had an opportunity to dive into some of the issues that are going on right now in the ungoverned regions in Libya specifically. But I think the lesson of the last decade and a half is in areas that are poorly governed or ungoverned, those radical elements are given the freedom to develop their violent capabilities and to inflict damage on U.S. interests and our citizens abroad. And the extent to which those areas are left ungoverned, they have the freedom to do that. So I look forward to working with Dave Rodriguez and his team in AFRICOM and the Congress and the committee to look at opportunities to continue to counter those threats across North Africa.
When we look at the time that we've watched Syria fall into chaos and again become a training ground for terrorists, and we compare that to what's happening in Libya, though, at what point do you say enough? It is time now for the United States to step forward. What have we learned in Syria?
Senator, I think the policy of the United States is an issue that we ought to discuss about our position in regards to all of the parties that are fighting in Syria. And we have to make a decision. And that decision shouldn't be the consequence of one person's opinion, but the collected opinions of the people who have studied the area. And so I worry a little bit that we not jump to a conclusion on what the best outcome would be for Syria, but we take a reasoned approach to our national interests in the region and to the stability of the region writ large with respect to all of the parties that are now fighting in Syria.
I know you served at SAC and you've recently been at STRATCOM, and I welcome you back anytime so we can continue our discussion on the need for modernization of our triad. Thank you, sir.
General Selva, the conflict in Syria has been going on for 4 years. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. Congratulations on your nominations. Just to pick up on Senator Fisher, I also agree that the policy surrounding cyber is really important for us to continue to dialogue about. We had testimony within the last year. I think it was from Admiral Rogers. It was somebody connected with Cyber Command. And the testimony was with respect to a particular cyber attack, if there was this kind of cyber attack, it could lead to war. And so my follow-up question is, well, so then a cyber attack in and of itself is not war, it's some pre-war kind of an attack? And then the answer to that was pretty hazy. I have been on this committee for 2.5 years now. I don't really have an understanding for what our cyber strategy is. Do we have a line by which we would say a cyber attack constitutes war? Do we have a clear doctrine for the kind of response that we should make to cyber attack? What is the policy with respect to cyber deterrence, cyber defense, and then offensive use of cyber? So this is not really sort of TRANSCOM. I'm not directing a question to you, but it's more to colleagues on the committee. I think we need to educate ourselves more and challenge our military brass to understand what the current dimension of cyber strategy is, and I appreciate Senator Fisher's questions in that regard. A compliment to each of you with respect to TRANSCOM. I think TRANSCOM is a great example of integration. I mean, TRANSCOM is cross-service. It is public and private. You probably do as good a job at balancing active, reserve, and guard as any of the components of the military. Senator Donnelly and I were in Iraq, and the folks flying us around in C-130s were, I think they were Pennsylvania Air Reservists on a 4-month stint, and that's pretty common. I hope that in your new role, General McDew, as the head of TRANSCOM, and General Selva, taken that lesson from TRANSCOM to the vice position with the Joint Chiefs, I hope you'll take that, the lessons of that kind of integration, public-private cross-service, Guard Active Reserve, and spread how that can be done more generally throughout the DOD. And if you want to just comment upon that, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Senator, I appreciate the compliment to United States Transportation Command. It is true that the command absolutely depends on the total force and the contribution of our commercial partners to our strategic lift around the world. If confirmed for the job as Vice Chairman, I look forward to bringing some of those lessons into the Joint Staff and into the interagency, and I look forward to working with this committee and finding ways to make that possible.
Great. General McDew.
If you allow me, Senator, just to brag on the men and women of my current command, Air Mobility Command, they do it better than anyone because they've lived through this together since 1968. We have had these bonds and these alliances with the Guard and Reserve, and we cannot operate without them.
General Selva, the military leadership at the Pentagon that gets over the finish line on audited financial statements, they'll have a star put on the sidewalk up here. I hope that you're going to be part of the team that gets us there. We've got a 2017 date by which we're supposed to be there. This is a question that Senator Manchin has been a real bird dog about, always asking about it. Talk to us about the status of the move toward audited financial statements for the DOD, because it sure makes it a lot easier for us to advocate, for example, about sequester relief, if we know that we are on a path to be able to do that.
Senator, for my position at TRANSCOM, we're one of the combatant commands that will have to assert our audit readiness as a consequence of managing a working capital fund that moves all of our equipment and personnel around the world. From that perspective, I can tell you we're making significant progress towards audit readiness, towards being able to account for every dollar that we spend. Across the department, I'm going to need some time to take a look at where each of the individual services are, but I will continue to be an advocate across the enterprise that we be prepared for our audit readiness deadline of October 2017. If confirmed, I look forward to working with all of the service chiefs and secretaries to make that happen.
Thank you. And just one last comment. I think we're about 24 hours into the Ramadi campaign in Iraq, and it's going to be a real test of the training and work we've done with the Iraqi military and Sunni leaders in the last year, the success of this campaign, and I just know that we're all thinking about that and monitoring the success of that mission carefully. Thank you for your service, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you both for your service. Thank you also to your families for their backing of you and their sacrifice. It is greatly appreciated, and it does not go unnoticed. Let me just begin. I find it interesting that both of you have, or that you have identified General Selva in your opening comments or in response to the chairman, the list of where you see our greatest threats. And I'm just going to identify that in the new national military strategy, General Martin Dempsey, current chairman, describes the need to counter revisionist states that threaten international peace and security. The strategy identifies Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea as the four principal revisionist states. General Dempsey also writes that the U.S. military advantage has begun to erode and that future conflicts will come more rapidly, last longer, and take place on a more technically challenging battlefield. In which areas, General Selva, in which areas has the U.S. military advantage begun to erode, if you agree with his statement? And where would you recommend that the Department of Defense focus its investments in response to this erosion?
Senator, I think there are four principal areas where that erosion has started to take place. The first is space. Up until the turn of this decade, the United States had pretty much dominance in space. That's no longer true. Across the networks of cyberspace, we see intruders and nation states acting to counter our capability to provide the command and control for our military that gives us the speed of decision on the modern battlefield. And then it wouldn't be fair not to highlight the fact that our opponents and our potential adversaries are looking for asymmetries across our conventional and nuclear capabilities. And as they detect and act against those asymmetries, they erode the capability that we have within our current force structure to react to threats that might emerge. So I would place the four in about that order.
Okay. General McDew, you identified cyber as being an item of major concern. I agree with your assessment. I'm just curious, though, with regard to whether we're talking about policy or as we talk about statutory assistance, if you've looked at and you've begun the process, where do you see the most important statutory changes, if any, that DOD would be required to make recommendations with regard to cyber capabilities and operations? Are there specific statutes that you've identified yet in your review?
Senator, I have not had that level of depth to have specific statutes, but if confirmed, I will endeavor to do so.
General Selva?
Senator, the only area that as the Transportation Command Commander that I looked for increasing capabilities is the ability, having looked into contract law and the imposition of specific requirements for reporting on intrusions, to work across the interagency to make sure that any location, any organization that received a notification of an intrusion into a commercial or a military network had an affirmative obligation to report that intrusion so that we could defend the networks that make us successful. That authority is tied up in a variety of statutes that prevent agencies from speaking to each other clearly across law enforcement and the military. Beyond that, I have not spent the time and effort yet to work with Admiral Rogers at Cyber Command to look at the broader national issue of cyber defense.
Okay. You identified as one of those four existential threats the country of Iran. In your view, is Iran still the leading state sponsor of terror?
Yes, sir, they are.
With the proposed nuclear treaty or nuclear agreement, which was announced this morning, if Iran is provided economic sanctions relief, do you believe Tehran would use some of these funds to enhance its military capabilities and its support for terrorist organizations?
Senator, I haven't yet had the opportunity to study the entire agreement, but on its face, what I've heard from the press, the immediate lifting of sanctions or the sequential lifting of sanctions will give Iran the access to more economic assets with which to sponsor state terrorism should they choose to do so. And I think we need to be alert to that possibility. And as the military, we have an obligation to provide the president with a full range of options to respond. So if confirmed, I look forward to working with the department to examine those issues more deeply.
How do you respond to any additional Iranian aggression that may be forthcoming with their additional capabilities for procuring weapons?
Senator, absent the actual context of that specific intervention and that specific sponsorship of terrorism or other malign activities, it's difficult for me to actually give you an answer to that question other than to say we need to have a range of available options with which to respond, whether it's militarily, diplomatically, economically, or otherwise.
But you clearly recognize that the additional threat would now exist.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thanks both of you all for your service, and also congratulations on your nominations, and looking forward to working with you in the future. Let me just say, and maybe General Selva, if I may ask this question, because I think both of you have answered, and General Dunford answered the question I asked last week, and Senator McCain just asked again, the greatest threat, and I think you all identified Russia. Is that opinion held by most of our military, higher echelon, if you will?
Senator, I believe it is, but I would actually quote an article I read early this morning from Dr. Andy Krepinevich. A quote in the article said that over the better part of the last decade and a half and the years that preceded it, this nation was able to look at the threats to our security through a periscope. And today we find ourselves having to analyze them through a kaleidoscope. And so as each facet of the threat becomes apparent to us, we have to have the capability to react. And so my reaction to the four major threats to the security of the United States comes from a military perspective. I'm not necessarily indicating that any of those states has a current intent to attack the United States, but all of them have the capability, and so we need to be ready to respond.
I've had the opportunity to have some dialogue with some of the people that were concerned about the relationships of the United States and Russia. And with that being said, could you comment on the state of the relationships, the dialogue going on, and what you would do to either improve, change, or have a different direction?
Senator, I haven't personally been involved in the dialogue, so it wouldn't be fair for me to comment on the dialogue itself, but what I will say
do we have one of your knowledge?
Yes, sir. And what I will say to you in the committee is, if confirmed for the position of Vice Chairman, I think it is very important that our senior military leaders maintain an open dialogue with the senior military leaders of competitor nations so that we can minimize the chance of miscalculation or missteps in any military operation anywhere in the world. That goes for Russia and China specifically, and for any other country that might wish us ill. We need to open those dialogues to make sure that we don't miscalculate.
We're speaking about Russia being our greatest challenge right now and the greatest threat or possible threat because of their capabilities. With that being said, I've spoken to some people from that arena, and they're telling me that the Cold War is colder today than it was when it was declared.
Senator, I don't know that to be true or false, other than that they have said it. But what I will tell you is that my experience is that the dialogue between senior leaders across our militaries has been open and frank. Yeah. That helps us avoid miscalculation. And
I'm just saying we're not hearing an awful lot of dialogue about this relationship or lack of a relationship. And now when two of our top people who basically are on verge of being nominated to lead our military forces have identified it and not hearing anything before, I think it kind of caught a lot of us by surprise, if you will.
Yes, sir.
That would be your direction. With that being said, I know the Iran nuclear deal we just talked about, it was revealed today that we have a tentative agreement. On that, I think when we asked for your response on policy, you said, when we asked what would be a good deal for the U.S., From a security standpoint, your response was important outcomes includes rolling back Iran's nuclear program, providing the international community with necessary access and transparency while preserving the sanctions imposed on conventional arms and ballistic missiles. And I believe some of those conventional arms and ballistic missiles have expired terms on them at time. Do you consider that a concern or a problem?
Senator, my understanding is that those sanctions have a 5-year and an 8-year term, having read the open press this morning. I haven't seen the details of the agreement and how those sanctions will be rolled back, but it is my understanding within the agreement that there are snapback provisions, that if we find Iranian behavior not to comport with the agreement, that we can snap back the original sanctions. What I don't know is whether that applies to the conventional weapons and the ballistic missile technologies. So if confirmed, I'm committed to taking a much deeper look at the text of the agreement to determine where our maneuvering space is.
One final question I have. Shortly after the fall of Ramadi, Secretary Carter stated the Iraqi forces show no will to fight despite vastly outnumbering ISIS fighters. There's at least one group in Iraq that I have no doubt has the will to fight, and that are the Kurds, and we've spoken about that. Are there ways to empower the Kurds and the Sunnis to engage and to help them without undermining I guess the one country solution or one state solution, if that's our policy, which I'm not certain I agree with, but for the sake of discussion, if you would have any comment on that.
Senator, our policy is to continue to work through the government in Iraq to empower all of the parties in Iraq that are willing to fight against ISIL and to defend Iraqi sovereignty. I would need more time to be able to examine the issue of whether or not supporting one party over the other makes more sense or not. If confirmed, I look forward to doing so.
Thank you, sir. My time has expired.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. U.S. Transcom is always very exciting to me. I am a transporter and a logistician, so I appreciate your service, especially in that area, very, very much. General McDew, I'd like to start with you. Senator Kane had pointed out the fact that Transcom does work between the National Guard, the U.S. Army Reserves, active duty component, and many, many contractors, wonderful civilians who fill in those gaps. So I would just like to visit with you a little bit about your thoughts on the role of the National Guard in supporting Transcom's mission to provide full-spectrum mobility solutions and enabling capabilities. And obviously, I have strong opinions there, but I'd like to hear yours, General McDew.
Senator, I believe we may share the same opinion.
I think so.
I am a strong supporter and I'm a huge fan of our National Guard and Air Force Reserve. We could not operate without them. It is vital to the defense of this nation and vital to everything we do in the transportation business. I can't imagine doing it without them.
Thank you. And do you see that there are ways that we could further enhance working with our reserve and our National Guard units? Is there a way to complete that bridge that we have existing out there?
I believe, Senator, that we need to continue to look at the authorities at which our guardsmen and reservists come to work under, look at the different statuses they work in and see where those can be streamlined. We also need to be very careful, though, that we understand and fully appreciate the differences between the active duty, the Guard, and the Reserve, and work with employers to ensure that that remains as strong as we think it ought to be.
That's exceptional. I appreciate that very much. And you brought up a great point that we don't often discuss as our employers that do see us gone for an extremely long periods of time, whether it's just from a 2-week annual training period or an IDT weekend to the year-long deployments that we have seen overseas. But I do believe that the National Guard and Reserve components within transportation are essential to supporting any mission that we have overseas, and so I thank you for that. I'd like to thank our employers out there for being willing to support our men and women that serve in uniform in a reserve and guard status. General Selva, of course, let's go back to U.S. Transcom as well. And what lessons learned, significant events are you taking forward from Transcom into the vice chair's position? What are some of the greatest assets that you will bring forward having those types of responsibilities with Transcom?
Senator, I think the greatest lesson I carry forward into any job is the dedication of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and Coast Guardsmen, and all of their civilian counterparts, both in and out of government, to get the job done. They depend on us for sound leadership and for advocacy. And so what I will take into the position as Vice Chairman, if confirmed, is that undying obligation to be an advocate for the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen who lay their lives on the line for all of us every day.
Thank you very much. I just want to score again, or underscore again, what some of the conversation has been today with regards to the Iran deal. And while we continue as legislators to work through what this deal entails as well, I did hear you say, General Selva, that you do believe that Iran with potential nuclear capabilities is a great threat to the United States. Is that correct?
Iran with nuclear capabilities would be a threat to our regional partners, to our allies, our friends, and to the United States. And so the extent to which this agreement forestalls their ability to build a nuclear weapon, I think we ought to look at all of the provisions therein to make sure that we're ready to respond for whatever else might come.
Thank you. And again, as well, with sanctions relief providing approximately $100 billion to Iran, I also believe that this would serve Iran's purpose of funding proxies throughout that region and being a state sponsor of terrorism. So I do have great concerns with this deal. I have great concerns with Iran overall, as well as a number of issues that we have worldwide. But that's for yet another day. Thank you, General Selva. Thank you, General McDew. I appreciate your service very much to our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank our witnesses for their service. And General Selva, you and I have met before. You are a extraordinarily thoughtful and straightforward officer, and I hope to encourage you in your new position, which is one of the most important in our government, where you will be directly advising the President, and particularly being on the Deputies Committee of the National Security Council. Will you be straightforward, honest, and courageous in providing your best advice and not be intimidated by the circumstances that surround your being in that position?
Well, Senator, that's the only person I know how to be.
Well, I certainly hope so, because in situations like this, policymakers don't need yes men. They need criticism and straightforward advice, and I certainly hope that you're prepared to provide that. That to me is really the fundamental responsibility of this position. To go to a more specific question, we had an explosion in Afghanistan a few days ago. Apparently over 30 people were killed. Do you have a view of the security situation in Afghanistan and what we can and should do in order to maintain the progress that's been made in that country?
Senator, it's been some time since I traveled to Afghanistan, but my overall impression is that the Afghan National Security Services, both their military and their national police, are making progress, and they are confronting the Taliban insurgents and terrorists where they present themselves. And so my view is that we need to empower them to continue that work. They have taken ownership of the sovereignty of the country of Afghanistan, and that is the place where we want them to be. And so I think we need to be careful about the assumptions we made relative to the timelines for their willingness and ability to manage their own sovereignty. And that goes to the stability of the government and the central government's command and control over those forces. And I think that's the place we need to go, is to think that through in that domain.
So I take it your advice would be that our disengagement should be based upon conditions on the ground and not arbitrary dates in a calendar.
Senator, I believe that's true.
Thank you. I hope you will pass that advice on in the strongest possible terms. We've talked a lot about cyber this morning, and I think there's plenty of responsibility to be spread around. I think it's one of the great disappointments of my 2.5 years here that we have not yet brought significant cyber legislation to the floor of the United States Senate. And when we have a catastrophic breach, to go home to our constituents and say, well, we couldn't do it because 4 different committees had authority and we really just couldn't get our act together, that's not going to be satisfactory to the people of the United States. So certainly there needs to be action here in the Congress, and hopefully that will be forthcoming this year. On the other hand, it seems to me that we need to be thinking about doctrine and the development of a doctrine of cyber, which we don't seem to have now, other than defense. And in my view, there has to be an offensive capability which our adversaries understand will be applied. The only good thing about the theory of deterrence and the mutually assured destruction which applied to our nuclear posture for 70 years is that it worked. And it just seems to me logical that if our policy is strictly defensive, we're like a guy in a fight who won't be allowed to punch. Eventually, you're going to lose that fight. And I would urge you to think about this, and I'd appreciate your thoughts, assuming we can identify it's a state actor, not an amateur hacker or a criminal conspiracy, but a state actor. It seems to me there has to be some price to be paid. Would you agree, General?
I do agree, Senator, and I look forward to working with the Committee of Confirmed to examine the doctrine for the offensive use of cyber capabilities, both as a deterrent and as an offensive weapon in warfare.
And I hope not only with the committee and with the Congress, but also with that all-important Deputies Committee of the National Security Council. That's where it seems to me this policy has to emanate, and then we can work it over here. General McDew, I assume you agree?
I do agree, Senator, that the role of attribution, the interesting part for me as I evolve my knowledge of the cyber threat is that it is such a low cost of entry and so much damage can be wielded from it.
Without consequences.
Right.
And we need to be talking about there need to be consequences. Well, I hope you gentlemen will pursue that, because right now we're playing defense and we're not getting very far. We're getting, it's getting more and more serious, and we are facing a catastrophic attack, in my view, akin to the next Pearl Harbor. And both we in the Congress and the administration have to be thinking about a more comprehensive doctrine and not just talking about how do we work together for defensive purposes. Again, gentlemen, thank you very much. General McDew, I understand your early flying career took place at Loring Air Force Base in northern Maine, and delighted to have you before us. Congratulations on your nominations. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, thank you for your service. Congratulations on your nomination. General McDew, I just want to add a compliment. At least in my career, I've had the opportunity to work with some of the TRANSCOM military members, and you're correct, I think, in many ways. Unheralded workhorse for the U.S. military in many ways behind the scenes. So I just want to commend all of your members on a great job, and want to commend your families for their service as well. General Selva, I just want to touch briefly, is obviously getting a lot of press right now on Iran. And one of the most powerful testimonies we had in front of this committee in the last half year was Henry Kissinger, who came in and talked to this committee about devising strategy. And one of the things he mentioned, that one of the most important things we need to ask ourselves as we're putting together strategy is, what do we seek to prevent as a country, no matter how it happens, and if necessary, alone? Kind of his top strategic thought for this committee. I had asked Secretary Carter during his confirmation hearing if he thought preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon would fall into that category. What do we seek to prevent, no matter how it happens, and if necessary, alone? He said yes, absolutely. Preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Now, that was during his confirmation testimony. It'll be interesting to see if he still believes that, given the agreement that's been announced. Do you agree with him on that?
I agree with Dr. Kissinger that if we can find no allies, partners, and friends to help us achieve the results that we believe are important, we have to be willing and able to go it alone.
But do you think that preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon falls into that category, like Secretary Carter did in his confirmation hearing?
Senator, I agree that preventing the Iranians from getting a nuclear weapon is a critical national interest.
So if this agreement, once we unpack it, allows for a pathway to develop a nuclear weapon after 10 or 15 years, would you disagree with it? In your personal view?
I will reserve judgment until I've had the opportunity to look at the entire agreement.
Well, I'm just posing a hypothetical. In your personal view, if the agreement in 10 to 15 years allow the Iranians to have a pathway to obtain a nuclear weapon, do you think that's in the national interest of the United States?
Then we will have to have the capability to address that eventuality when it's presented, Senator.
You're not answering my question, General.
Sir, I am opposed to the Iranians possessing a nuclear weapon.
In 15 years?
Ever.
Okay.
Because
So if this agreement allows that in 15 years, you would think that's not in the interest of the United States?
Correct.
Thank you. Let me ask a question. You know, you've spent a lot of time in your career in the Asia Pacific. This committee's been very interested in the rebalance strategy, and the NDAA that just passed with bipartisan numbers had a strong provision in supporting the President's Asia Pacific rebalance. The countries that you actually mention as the top threats are all in the Asia Pacific. And what we were trying to do in the NDA is provide additional credibility to the President. In that kind of defense guidance from the Congress, should the Department of Defense be listening to the Congress?
Senator, I think the Department always has an obligation to listen to the will of the Congress.
So if there's provisions in the NDAA that say we should not be decreasing but increasing our force posture in the Asia Pacific to enhance and provide credibility to the President's Asia Pacific rebalance strategy, the DoD should be doing that?
To the extent that supports our national objectives globally, yes, sir.
And if it seems that we're not doing this, if you're confirmed, will you work with this committee to make sure that the Department of Defense is implementing the Congress's defense guidance to increase forces in the Asia Pacific?
Senator, I will commit to you and to any member of Congress to work with the Congress to make sure that we have a balanced approach to the reaction that we have to the fiscal environment we live in. And if that means we have to adjust our force structure on any part of the globe, I'll make sure that I articulate the position that the services and the combatant commanders have taken in making that happen.
But the Congress said we need to be increasing forces in the Asia Pacific. Should the Department of Defense be doing that, given that that's what we're saying here in terms of our constitutional oversight role for the defense of the nation?
Sir, the extent to which the Congress funds the capabilities and provides the Department the flexibility within those funds to make the will of the Congress happen, yes, sir, we should.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for being here today and for your willingness to continue to serve. I want to just follow up a little bit on the cyber comments discussion that has been made this morning, because I noticed that we are opening a Silicon Valley outreach office called the Defense Innovation Unit, experimental, and I wonder if you could speak to what the goal of that office is.
Senator, I'm not aware of the detail of that specific office, but I am aware of broad outreach across the department to try and examine opportunities to better understand our capacity to defend and protect the networks that are represented across all of our infrastructure, commercial and military and cyber. I look forward to actually digging into that particular issue a little bit if confirmed for the position of Vice Chairman.
Thank you. I appreciated the opportunity for us to talk a little bit before this hearing, and one of the things that we talked about when we met General Selva is the challenge that we're facing from Russia, and that one of the areas where it's a real problem is the Russian propaganda campaign that, particularly in Eastern Europe and the Baltics, they are dealing with. So can you tell me what we're doing to respond to that Russia propaganda campaign, and whether you believe the DoD is coordinating as in the best way to address that with the Department of State?
Senator, subject to our meeting, I did a good bit more research on that subject, and it is my understanding that there is an operational and tactical level capability inside the department to react to propaganda campaigns against our allies, partners, and friends. But that is done in close collaboration with the Department of State and their broader responsibility for public diplomacy.
And so do you have thoughts about whether there are more efforts that can be undertaken where we can not only cooperate more closely, but be more proactive in our response to what Russia is doing?
Senator, I think we need to evaluate each of the situations where the Russians are imposing their will on their close neighbors, some of whom are our allies, and make sure that we are in fact telling the truth when Russian intervention threatens the security of those sovereign states.
General Selva and General McDew, as you're both aware, one of the real costs within the Department of Defense is for energy. And as you have an overlapping responsibility for Transcom, can you talk, I guess, General McDew, I will go to you first, about efforts to reduce energy use across the department and why that's important?
As the largest user of energy in the federal government, it is very important that we get our act together on how we do that. Our chief scientists and several people in my command and Air Mobility Command have worked with U.S. Transportation Command and the Department of Transportation at a number of initiatives, from how we fly our routes, how we configure our airplanes. We have done a number of initiatives to take weight off airplanes. It seems like not a big deal, but if you talk about 1 or 2% on an airplane that flies as often as we fly, it becomes actually significant. Flying in formation with another airplane and all the things we can do to take the guesswork out of some of the things we do. There's more than that.
Well, talk, if you will, about the targeted savings you think there is in the future. General Selva.
Senator, I would point out two within the transportation enterprise. First is an initiative to more effectively package the commodities that we ship over the ocean. The normal process years ago had us at about a 55% utilization rate of the space in the containers that travel over ocean. We have raised that metric to 85% and are on a pathway to raise it to 90% by volume. The same has been applied to our aircraft, where we build the cargo loads to a higher density. We have combined that with an algorithm that tells us where it's the cheapest to buy the fuel that we carry. All in combination, those initiatives have yielded about $1.5 billion in savings over the last 18 months.
So it's significant to the department. Let me also, I only have a little time left, but I understand, General McDew, that you have experience flying the KC-135s, and you may be aware that Pease Air Base in New Hampshire is the first base to receive the new KC-46A aerial refueling tankers. We are a lot proud of that. I wonder if you could talk about the importance of that program and also its future role in supporting military operations around the world.
Absolutely, Senator. The unit at Pease has a strong history in air refueling and will be a valuable partner for decades to come. I have personally been to that unit, I have flown with members of that unit, and I've known that unit for a long time. The KC-135 has been the backbone of our air refueling fleet for decades and will be for decades to come. The KC-46 will bring new capabilities and a younger airplane to the fight, and it is great to have Pease partner. You have embraced our airmen, our active duty airmen who have joined that unit, and we can't thank you enough for the work that's done at Pease to bring on that airplane.
Well, thank you. I think it's a great model for integration between active duty and the Guard, and hopefully we will continue to see the role of the KC-46 be more prominent as we look at what's happening around the world. Thank you both very much.
Thank you for that commercial, General McDew. Senator Ahab.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being here and for your service to the nation. And following up on that commercial very much, I wanted to ask you, right now, as I understand it, with Pease and the 157th receiving the first National Guard unit to receive the basing of the KC-46A, There actually is the Site Activation Task Force right now at Pease today, and that means approximately 60 subject matter experts from the National Guard Bureau, Air Mobility Command, and the program office at Wright-Patterson are at Pease to prepare for the arrival of the KC-46A. I just want to ask both of you, General Selva, General McDew, is Pease still scheduled to receive 12 primary aircraft in December of 2017?
Absolutely.
I will echo my colleague, yes, ma'am.
Well, that's terrific, and they're ready to receive them and looking forward to it. So we're glad that the Site Activation Task Force is there today. In addition to that, you've spoken, General McDew, about having actually flown with the 157th and the outstanding work that they've done for the nation. And one of the things that's important is the strategic location of Pease in the Northeast and the ability that we've been able to provide that support for U.S. Transcom. And so one of the things that I think makes it strategic is also the facilities that we have there. So General Selva and General McDew, do you believe it's important to maintain the existing facilities, including specifically the aircraft parking ramps, to support the day-to-day operations and contingency operations supporting Transcom in the Northeast from Pease?
Senator, as the combatant commander responsible for managing air refueling, the ability to deploy from and employ from sufficient ramp space that has hydrant refueling capable of handling tankers is a strategic asset up and down the eastern seaboard. Pease is one of several locations that has that capability, but it is one we use significantly.
So General McDew, do you think it's important that we maintain that, especially with the basing of the new KC-46A at Pease?
I do, Senator.
Thank you. I appreciate it, General. I also wanted to follow up on some of the cyber questions that you've been asked. And what is it that we're seeing in terms of Transcom with additional cyber attacks? What do you believe are the biggest challenges for this area of command, which is so critical to everything else we do in our ability, obviously, to defend the nation?
So being in the awkward position of having the sitting Transcom commander and the nominated Transcom commander at the table, let me open. As a consequence of the work that this committee did, in addition to work that the intelligence community had ongoing on the threats to Transcom, we've actually completely rewired the way we do cyber defense and cyber hygiene within the command. So we have put our forces essentially on the offense, looking for people that are intruding into the network. And the extent to which those are in law enforcement issue, we have a liaison from the FBI and local law enforcement in our headquarters that attends to those parts of the issues. We have members of the intelligence community that provide liaison into the interagency intelligence community if it's an intelligence issue. And then we have the capacity to turn those intrusions over to Cyber Command for our cyber mission team to begin defensive and potentially offensive action if required. We exercised that in a recent exercise without getting into the classified results. We had a pretty good outcome with the red team trying to attack our networks. So management of our cyber capability to do the command and control work that we do across such a broad network is incredibly important to us.
Is that a model that you've talked about, which sounds like a very important model, and obviously I'm glad to hear you're seeing some success with it, is that something that we're going to see now that you're nominated to be the vice chairman being implemented in other commands?
Senator, we've taken all the benchmarks from that set of lessons learned and shared them with all the other combatant commanders and with Cybercom. I will commit, if confirmed, to becoming the vice chairman to make sure that all the combatant commanders continue to share those kinds of lessons learned and improve our cyber defense capability.
Well, I think that's really important. I appreciate it, and I want to thank both of you for your service and your family to the nation. We deeply appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator.
Would the senator from Maine have any additional comments about the criticality of Pease Air Force Base to Western civilization as we know it?
I was just going to comment that if I were running out of fuel over the North Atlantic, I would want the maniacs from the 101st Air Refueling Wing in Bangor to come and
I see. I thank the senator from Maine.
There are other air refueling rings in New England. I appreciate the chairman's opportunity to make that point.
Thank you. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your service, and thank you to your families as well for their extraordinarily valuable support and service. I want to talk about a subject that has not been covered so far, small business set-asides. I'm a strong supporter of small business set-asides and the American shipping industry and our country's domestic merchant marine sector. A number of constituents of mine have raised this issue with me, saying that the Department of Defense has moved away from the dedicated service contract model and started using a new system called universal service contracts to transport goods via ocean from the U.S. mainland to United States military installations around the globe. My constituent has raised concerns with Transcom regarding the statutory requirement to use small businesses and mandatory small business preferences, but those concerns have not been met. I suspect others have raised similar kinds of concerns from other states, and so I'm going to ask you whether, if you're confirmed, you'll work with my office to ensure that the statutory requirement to use small business and mandatory small business preferences is complied with.
Senator, I will do so if confirmed.
Are you aware of this change of policy?
I am not aware of that one, Senator, specifically.
Could you look into it and get back to me?
I can, Senator.
And if confirmed, what steps or policy changes can you take to ensure that small businesses, in fact, have a fair shot at doing business with Transcom?
Senator, I've been a proponent and advocate for small businesses for my entire career. I will pledge to you, if confirmed, I will look deeply into this, and I can't imagine us having a process that discounts small businesses, so I'll have to see how we can encounter small business.
What changes or policies in the course of your commitment, your past commitment, and I welcome it, have you seen the Department of Defense undertake? What kinds of initiatives?
I can't, other than the fact that I can tell you that the Department of Defense measures how often we actually contract with small businesses in several different categories. There is a grade for an organization inside, at least I'm familiar right now, the Department of the Air Force, on how we do with small businesses. So I'm somewhat surprised by your comments right now, Senator.
Well, I hope that it is a surprise that is based on a misunderstanding that can be easily corrected, and I welcome your comments. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Gentlemen, thank you for your service along with your families, and on behalf of Chairman McCain, I would declare the hearing adjourned.